What would be your advice to SIP investors?
SIP is a amazing savings instrument. I am saying that the decision making कि भाई SIP करना चाहिए, that is more as a savings tool. But वो SIP कहाँ करना चाहिए?
So to those investors who are right now chasing mid caps and small caps, looking at technical breakouts on the charts, would you ask them to exercise caution?
If you remember in 2008 when Nifty crashed by around 60%, small cap index crashed by around 80%. I would say at any point in time, one should allocate only that much percentage of the portfolio in small mid caps, which fits into the risk profile of their overall portfolio.
And what's the biggest mistake that retail investors often make?
Like I had mentioned, right? In my view, it's two things. One is trying to focus a lot on कि भाई मुझे right fund pick करना है, number one fund pick करना है, right? Just take a step back. First think about कि भाई मुझे कौन सा पैसा कहाँ लगाना चाहिए. And the second one is
Can data, technology, and investing dynamically in multi-assets make you a better investor and build long-term wealth? Bhautik Ambani, CEO, AlphaGrep Mutual Fund, joins us today to discuss mutual funds, SIPs, asset allocation, and quantitative investments. Bhautik, welcome to the Rediff Podcast.
Thank you so much, Prasanna. It's my pleasure to be here today.
There are more than 30 multi-asset allocation funds right now active in the market. Why another one? Why this one now? What gap are you trying to fill for the investors?
Sure. So, Prasanna, generally, when we look at the industry, when we look at, as you rightly mentioned, there are more than probably 30 multi-asset funds in the market. We see two categories of multi-asset funds broadly. Majority of them run a static asset allocation. उसका मतलब ये है कि out of 100 rupees, broadly around a certain percentage is in equity, which what we generally say as industry data, which is there in our presentation also, कि broadly around 55 to 60% is in equity, 20-25% is in debt, and 10-15% gold, silver, maybe some other instruments.
But not real estate.
Not real estate, but REITs is probably part of that, right? And the way we look at it is REIT again is more like an income generating asset. So we would probably classify it closer to equities in terms of risk return profile, right? Now, when we look at this mix, we see two things. One is that majority of the money is sitting in equities. उसका मतलब ये है कि if equity does well, my portfolio will do well. If equity doesn't do well, my portfolio won't do well because majority of the money is sitting there. Second thing that we see is that irrespective of market conditions, right? Like for example, let's look at the last 5 years. In the last 5 years, you probably had a patch between 21 to 24 where equity markets did very well.
Yeah.
And in the last 2 years, equity markets have been broadly flat, which means that equity investors have not made any returns.
Not earned much.
And in that same period, commodity has done phenomenally well.
Yeah. Especially gold and silver.
Especially gold and silver. Now, just think about this, that irrespective of market conditions, we are banking on one asset class, which means we are not changing with market conditions. And what we are also saying is that if that one asset class will do well, will our portfolio do well?
Yeah.
Okay. Now, the approach that we think of broadly, okay, as a philosophy is that A, markets are dynamic. Okay. B, we are not trying to predict markets here, but we are trying to adapt with market situations. So let me give you some data here.
Yeah.
Okay, so we actually split the last 20 years, okay, into broadly 12 economic cycles. Okay. When I say economic cycles, these are periods like, for example, just a global financial crisis happened, so 2 saal chala. Yeah, that happened for a couple of drawdown in the markets. Crash. Exactly. Then we had, let's say, the Eurozone crisis in 2011. Then you had taper tantrum, between 13 to 16. Then you had LNFS crisis in 2018.
Yeah, that was India specific though.
Exactly, that was India specific. So I'm just saying, whether it's global or India, okay, we had broadly 12 such economic cycles that we identified.
Okay.
Then the second step that we did was that in 12 cycles mein, let's look at the performance of 3 asset classes. equity, commodities, and fixed income. And commodities, we looked at gold. Now, across these 12 cycles, what we have seen as data is that only 50% times, which means 6 out of 12 times, has equity been a winner.
Okay, it's just a flip of a coin.
Exactly, right? And the balance 50% times is largely gold, which has done better than the other two asset classes. The second thing that we also noticed was that whenever there was a big crisis in the market, equity was the only asset class which also saw a sharp drawdown. Okay, so a big loss at that point in time. So now think about two things. कि भाई 20 साल में only 50% times equity has been a winner. Okay, in terms of asset classes. 2, you have seen sharp drawdowns in equities when the markets go through crisis. Does it make sense that if the markets are so dynamic and there is rotation which is happening at an asset class level,
Very dynamic.
do we just bank on one asset class to do the job for us? Or if there is a way to be disciplined, okay, to potentially dynamically allocate across asset classes, okay, and get a smoother journey, if that is possible to do, would you rather not choose to do that?
From an investor point of view, investors कैसे benefit करेंगे इससे?
Yes. मैं आपको बताता हूँ. See, generally क्या होता है ना प्रशांत, आप देखोगे तो most investors ना land up spending a lot of time on picking the right funds. Okay. And when I say picking the right funds, उनका सोचना ये है, fixated है कि मुझे equity में पैसा डालना है. वो तो decide कर लिया.
Top 5 mutual funds ढूंढते हैं and they
उसके अंदर invest करते हैं. And there is enough and more research to prove that over a long period of time, you can actually generate far superior alphas and risk-adjusted returns by having the right asset allocation. तो asset allocation पे तो अपन focus ही कर रहे हैं, अपन सीधा step 2 पे जा रहे हैं. हमने decide कर लिया कि equity में पैसा लगाना है और equity में कौन से fund में पैसा लगाना है. And our view is that कि आप ज़्यादा इसके अंदर loss कर रहे हो by let's say trying to pick the number 1 fund, okay, rather than doing the right asset allocation. Let's say आपने नंबर 2 फंड भी खरीद लिया ना, तब भी ठीक है आपके पोर्टफोलियो, बट अगर जो आपने राइट एसेट एलोकेशन कर लिया, ओके, और उसको अगर जो सही तरीके से मैनेज कर लिया इन द लॉन्ग टर्म, दैट इटसेल्फ कैन गिव यू अ मच बेटर रिटर्न प्रोफाइल along with risk, right, over a long period of time.
So AlphaGrep also launched, I guess the issue is open now.
Yes.
AlphaGrep multi-asset allocation fund.
Yes.
So how is it different from others? What value are you bringing on the table for investors?
I'll tell you. So the way we are doing this is, so before I talk about what we are doing differently, I think for the viewers it's very important to understand कि AlphaGrep का background क्या है.
Okay.
And why we are saying that कि हम ये चीज कर सकते हैं जो बाकी लोग नहीं कर सकते या बाकी लोग से अच्छा
अल्फा जनरेट कर सकते.
Yes. तो मैं आपको थोड़ा बैकग्राउंड देता हूँ. सो AlphaGrep एज अ कंपनी ना 16 साल पुरानी है. We have been now managing or deploying monies in India global markets for 16 years. And as of today, AlphaGrep runs 2 businesses. एक जहाँ पे हम सिर्फ खुद का पैसा मैनेज करते हैं, which is called prop investments या proprietary trading. वो हम 16 साल से कर रहे हैं. एंड जो फाउंडर्स भी है दोनों, मोहित एंड प्रशांत, दोनों का बैकग्राउंड भी क्वांटिटेटिव इन्वेस्टमेंट, मॉडल बेस्ड इन्वेस्टिंग के साथ ही है. सो दोनों वॉट एंड पास आउट है.
एग्जैक्टली, दोनों बीएससी इकोनॉमिक्स.
यस. प्लस उन्होंने pretty much जो वर्ल्ड के सम ऑफ द लार्जेस्ट क्वांटिटेटिव फंड्स है उनके साथ काम किया हुआ है, एक्सपीरियंस लिया हुआ है. सो नेम्स लाइक Citadel, D. Shaw, AQR.
Citadel, I guess.
Yes. And then 2010 is when they started AlphaGrep. Okay. Then once they started AlphaGrep, they started with a relatively smaller base of capital. And along the way, जैसे company grow होती गई, they expanded globally, they diversified into other type of strategies. Let's kind of fast forward to आज कहाँ है AlphaGrep. So आज on the proprietary side, I can say that AlphaGrep will be probably amongst the top few domestic proprietary firms in India by way of capital, revenue, number of people, market share, all of that. Another thing that I can probably say is that it's not the reverse where generally we see MNCs coming to India. In our case, it's a homegrown company which has now become a multinational.
Okay.
So today AlphaGrep has presence in 8 countries around the world. We are connected to 30 exchanges around the world. And we pretty much trade all the traditional asset classes. So equities, commodities, currencies, interest rate, सारे trade करता है. Now,
which brings us back to the question: how will this help?
Yes.
This background help investors generate alpha or better alpha than competitors.
So see, there are two things which we believe is our asset, okay, at a group level. So we have 500 employees. Okay. Out of the 500 employees, there are around half of them who we call quantitative researchers. Okay. In very simple terms, जैसे हम लोग common layman language में बोलते हैं, हम लोग को 250 लोग की investment team है group level पे. ठीक है.
Huge team.
The guys who come up with strategies. Now, because everything that we do is quantitative, everything is, let's say, based on models, data, and data science for that matter, technology is very important. So there's a separate 150 member team which only manages the technology infra for the company. Okay. So 250 लोग का investment team at a group level, 150 लोग का technology team at a group level, and let's look at the pedigree of people now. 500 में से तकरीबन 400-450 engineers है. Okay. We actually like to call ourselves a technology company which is also into managing money. Okay. तकरीबन 250-250 will be from the top 4 IITs in India.
Okay.
So imagine the pedigree of the people out here. Okay. The other thing is that because हमने technology में इतना invest किया है, we have also invested a lot in data. This is public data, but ये सब data है ना, सालों से AlphaGrep ने collect किया है, store किया है, clean किया है, and which is stored in a repository or in a library today. Okay. So that is one edge. 2 is the people edge. And 3 is obviously the DNA of doing this. Which is to our core, right? DNA of quantitative investing. Now, यही capabilities को AlphaGrep ने तकरीबन 4 साल पहले decide किया कि we should get into managing outside money also. Because what we believe was this कि ये institutional capabilities हैं. Right? हमको इसको बाहर के investors को भी offer करना चाहिए. तो 4 साल पहले we entered into asset management. Okay. So asset management में हमें group level पे 3 business verticals, एक चाइना में, एक UK में, एक इंडिया में, तीनों मिला के आज की तारीख में today we have around $1.5 billion, मतलब तकरीबन 15,000 करोड़ है third party capital of under management. Now India में भी हम 4 साल से ऐसा नहीं है कि हम products नहीं manage कर रहे for outside money. So we already have 2 Cat 3 AIFs. We have 1 AIF in Gift City. We have a long only PMS. So ये सारी चीजें हम already कर रहे थे.
Gift City is where everybody is want to make the presence felt.
Yes. In fact, Gift City, the first fund that we have done is an outbound fund, is not an inbound fund. Okay. And the other thing is that तकरीबन 3 महीने पहले we also got our mutual fund license. So this is AlphaGrep's first foray into retail. Okay. Now ये हो गया हमारा background. Now let me come to the fund. Okay.
How are you going to do it differently?
Yes. So ये जो fund है, इसके अंदर हमने क्या किया है कि एक तो हम लोग का जो asset allocation है, let's say equity, debt, commodities, and maybe in future even global investing.
Okay. As of now, it's only equity, debt, and
commodities. Global investing is already enabled in our SID, but as we all know, the RBI limit is kind of capped out for the industry today. When that opens up, we will be able to kind of invest in this fund also. So that will probably become like a 4th leg. But let's talk about the first 3 legs today. Okay, so equity, commodities, and fixed income. Now, across these 3 asset classes, generally जो लोग fixed allocation चलाते हैं, in our case, the entire asset allocation is dynamic. That's point number 1. 2, how dynamic and what kind of flexibility do we have? So in terms of net exposures, our equity can go down to as low as 10% to as high as 60%. Fixed income, similar, 10 to 60%. And commodities, 10 to 40%.
Okay.
So the first point here is that हम तीनों asset class को almost equal opportunity दे रहे हैं to participate.
Okay.
Based on what the data is telling us. Now the second thing is that the dynamism that comes for us, okay, कि हमको कौन से asset class में कितना लगाना है, the starting point is actually a statistical model. And that statistical model is a cross asset model. When I say cross asset, वो तीनों asset class को एक package की तरह दिखता है. Generally, हम लोग क्या देखते हैं ना कि when we look at dynamic strategies in the market, what we have seen is that the starting point for a lot of those models, what we have seen is valuations. कि market का PE ratio क्या है, price to book क्या है. ना आप मुझे बताइए प्रसन्ना कि मैं अगर जो equity market का PE ratio या price to book देता हूँ, उससे मुझे commodity valuations के बारे में क्या पता चलता है और मुझे डेट के वैल्यूएशन के बारे में क्या पता चलता है? नहीं पता चलता है, राइट? तो इमेजिन कीजिए मैं एक एसेट क्लास का वैल्यूएशन देख रहा हूं और डिसाइड कर रहा हूं कि मुझे तीनों में कितना पैसा लगाना है. इज दैट द राइट थिंग टू डू?
ऑफ कोर्स नॉट,
राइट? इन आवर केस एंड देन इन दैट केस वी हैव अज्यूम कि भाई इक्विटी जिसमें हमको मैक्सिमम पैसा लगाना है, इसलिए हम उसके बेसिस पे पूरा पैसा लगा देंगे फंड का. इन आवर केस दैट इज नॉट what we are doing. So what we are doing is that it's a statistical model जो तीनों asset class को एक साथ देखता है. Couple of approaches that we are deployed out here. These are called risk parity, sharp optimization.
Sharp ratio देख के.
हाँ, जिसमें शार्प रेशो देखते हैं तीनों एसेट क्लासेस का एक साथ. रिस्क पैरिटी में हम लोग रिटर्न इग्नोर करते हैं, बट तीनों एसेट क्लास का रिस्क कंपेयर करते हैं एंड सेइंग कि भाई हमको किस में लगा.
थिंग आई गेस रिस्क क्या ले रहे हैं टू जनरेट व्हाट काइंड.
एग्जैक्टली, जो काफी बार लोग इग्नोर करते हैं. सब लोग क्या न्यूमरेटर देखते हैं कि मेरा रिटर्न कितना बन रहा है, बट रिस्क इग्नोर करते हैं, राइट. एंड सो दैट इज द स्टार्टिंग पॉइंट ऑफ आवर मॉडल. सो हम लोग पहले ही बोल रहे हैं कि हमको रिस्क और रिटर्न दोनों साथ में देखने हैं. हमको सिर्फ रिटर्न देके पैसा नहीं लगाना है, ठीक है. एंड देन वी ओवरले दैट विद मैक्रोज एंड स्टफ लाइक दैट. सो दैट्स द अदर पॉइंट कि एक तो हम लोग के पास डायनामिज्म है, फ्लेक्सिबिलिटी है. दूसरा ये है कि क्रॉस एसेट मॉडल्स हैं. ओके, द थर्ड थिंग इज दैट बेसिस दिस then we allocate across the 3 asset classes, and because we are looking at statistical data which is relatively shorter term data, our rebalancing frequency is weekly.
Okay.
On a weekly basis we can adjust our exposure across the 3 asset classes.
Okay.
Can,
but not necessarily you will do it.
It will depend on the data.
churn हो जाता है weekly में. I mean,
see, the way I would
involve होते हैं.
Possible है. See, the way I would look at it, I'll give you numbers also. Like we've kind of backtested this for 20 years and we've adjusted for cost, expense ratio, everything. Okay, and I'll give you the numbers. But point here is that it's like should I have the tail wagging the dog kind of a thing, right? कि भाई मैं cost देख के decide करूँ कि मुझे क्या करना चाहिए, और should data be telling me मुझे कब asset class में कब रहना चाहिए और कितना रहना चाहिए, should that be the decision making point? Okay. Right? So that is point number 1, that there is weekly rebalancing. Second thing is that कि once the model tells us कि भाई कितना पैसा equity में लगाना है, कितना commodities में लगाना है, कितना debt में लगाना है, we have a second engine which does stock selection on an active basis, and there's a separate engine which does commodity selection. Okay. So the equity selection engine is a multi-factor model, which means that we are not biased towards any one style. कि भाई हमको सिर्फ क्वालिटी देख के पैसा लगाना है, हमको सिर्फ वैल्यू देख के लगाना है, हमको सिर्फ ग्रोथ बेसिस स्टॉक लगाना है. वी डोंट डू दैट. इट्स अ मल्टी फैक्टर मॉडल जो सारी की सारी स्टाइल्स मॉडल में इन्वॉल्व है. डिपेंडिंग ऑन विच स्टाइल इज डूइंग वेल एट विच पॉइंट ऑफ टाइम, द मॉडल इज बिल्ट इन सच अ वे दैट कैन कीप्स अडेप्टिंग और रीएडजस्टिंग टू द मार्केट्स. Second thing within that model is that, because again this is where AlphaGrep's difference comes in, generally most people land up looking at traditional data and invest in stocks. When I say traditional data, fundamentals देख लिया largely, so P&L, balance sheet, annual report, and maybe to a certain extent marry that with technicals. In our case, हम वो तो देखते ही हैं. We marry that with a lot of alternative data. When I say alternative data, imagine things like sentiments. Today, there are data sources which can actually scrape through कि भाई, you know, social media पे क्या बात हो रही है, Reddit पे क्या बात हो रही है. All of that can be looked at as signals. Okay. You yourself as a technology company. Yes. There are machine learning signals which do that. Right? So sentiments, flow data, microstructure data, like order book data, derivatives data, all of this can give you some kind of signal. And this is available today. So the more data you can access, the more patterns you can identify, right? There is a higher probability, okay, of getting a smoother ride and maybe getting a smoother ride with certain consistent alpha. Okay. Second part on commodity selection. Within commodities, again, looking at our group's expertise, okay, and the team's expertise, we are not just restricted to gold, silver. We will be exposed to gold, silver, copper, and crude. All 4 commodities to start with.
So any particular reason adding copper and crude?
So see, for any multi-asset strategy, if you look at it globally, the more instruments that you diversify across, जहाँ पे जो इंस्ट्रूमेंट्स में एक दूसरे के साथ relatively low correlation है, अब जितने इंस्ट्रूमेंट ऐड करोगे, it helps you improve the risk-adjusted returns to that extent. Now in India, the reason we have chosen these 4 commodities to start with is not कि भाई हमको दूसरी commodities में हमारे पास models नहीं है या हमको deploy नहीं करना है, is primarily from a point of view that we filtered these 4 commodities from a liquidity standpoint. कि ये चारों commodities on MCX are probably the most liquid commodities that we want to invest in. Tomorrow, let's say if there are other commodities which also become liquid enough and fits into our criteria, we'll add them as well. Okay, so we're not just going to be restricted to these 4. For now, it is these 4. Tomorrow, we can add more. Okay. So this is also another unique feature of this fund. Now, when we did the entire, let's say backtest for 20 years on this model, I'll give you some numbers here. On a 20-year period, our average equity allocation in the model is closer to 30%.
Bus. Average, yeah.
Yes, average is 30. And now imagine this is almost half of existing multi-asset funds का जो industry average है.
Okay.
our average exposure to commodities is around 25-26%. And the balance is debt.
Okay.
Okay, now invariably जब भी कोई ये नंबर सुनता है बोलता है कि भैया बहुत कंजर्वेटिव स्ट्रैटेजी चला रहे हो,
Exactly, हाँ.
इसमें रिटर्न कम्पिटिटिव नहीं बनेगा. हाँ, अल्फा कैसा आएगा, रिटर्न कम्पिटिटिव नहीं बनेगा. ठीक है. Now before I tell you our numbers, let me give you numbers saying that कि as a reference point कि अगर तो किसी ने पूरा 100 रुपया निफ्टी में लगाया होता लास्ट 20 साल में,
Okay.
तो उसने कितना रिटर्न बनाया था और कितना रिस्क लिया होता वो रिटर्न बनाने के लिए.
Okay. वो ज्यादा जरूरी, कितना रिस्क लेके आप रिटर्न बना रहे हैं.
एग्जैक्टली. तो आपको नंबर्स बताता हूं मैं. तो लास्ट 20 साल का निफ्टी का रिटर्न इज अराउंड 11-11.5% का CAGR.
Okay.
ओके. नाउ रिस्क, ये 11.5 या 11% का रिटर्न कमाने के लिए एन इन्वेस्टर हैज एक्सपीरियंस्ड अ वॉलेटिलिटी ऑफ अराउंड 20% annualized volatility. Okay. And the max drawdown that you also know, max fall, the loss in the portfolio was around 60%. जो GFC में होता, ग्लोबल फाइनेंशियल में होता. And there have been multiple 1, 2, 3 year periods, rolling basis, जहाँ पे नेगेटिव रिटर्न लोगों ने 3 साल में भी देखा है.
Okay.
ठीक है. तो ये निफ्टी के नंबर्स हैं.
So to put it simply, अगर कोई निफ्टी में 100 रुपए लगाता तो उसके 100 के 150 हो जाते और 150 से धड़ाक से 110 हो जाता.
Yes. ज्यादा गिर जाता. Yes, इतनी volatility.
Okay.
इतनी volatility देखा है.
Investor will not be able to digest.
See,
or it's काफी difficult to digest.
See, काफी बार क्या है ना कि investing is just not about trying to maximize returns. We believe that it is more about giving an investment vehicle to a client जिसके अंदर an investor will stay invested for the maximum time.
Expecting what kind of return?
Expecting, हाँ, so I will tell you now. Okay, so ये हो गया निफ्टी के numbers. Now let me tell you कि let's say किसी ने जो static multi asset चलाया होता, पहले वो देख लेते हैं कि let's say 100 में से 60 रुपए इक्विटी, 25 रुपए डेट और 15 रुपए गोल्ड किया होता. ओके. और 60 रुपए जो इक्विटी में डाला वो निफ्टी में डाल दिया होता. ओके. सो देयर इज नो स्टॉक सिलेक्शन अल्फा देयर. अगर जो वो किया होता एंड उसको मंथली रीबैलेंस किया होता तो दैट वुड हैव जनरेटेड अ CAGR ऑफ अराउंड 9.5%.
Okay.
Volatility of around 12.5.
Okay.
And max drawdown even in this case would have been around 40%. So in the worst scenario 100 का 60 बचा होता.
Okay.
ठीक है.
Yeah.
Now look at our model where we are doing dynamic asset allocation, right? Adding our layer 1 and layer 2, which is nothing but asset allocation का alpha plus stock selection or stroke commodity selection alpha, दोनों add करके in our 20-year period, what our backtest shows us is a 14% CAGR. Okay.
Okay.
This is after adjusting for fees,
Okay.
expenses, everything. But more importantly, volatility 7.5 की,
Okay.
which is 1/3 of Nifty, and max drawdown तकरीबन 12.5-13%, which is less than 1/4 of Nifty.
So that is the biggest plus here.
Exactly.
जो drawdown है.
Exactly. Now आप imagine कीजिए, in the long term, what this model is able to achieve is broadly equity-like returns with 1/3 or 1/4 the risk. Now imagine what kind of a smooth ride can an investor get here.
Exactly.
Okay.
Lot of peace of mind investing.
Yes. Now, peace of mind investing for investors, peace of mind investing even for the person who's recommending the fund
Okay.
to someone, right? And the investor is not continuously worrying about, अरे market महंगा है, सस्ता है, इधर geopolitical issue हो रहा है, इधर कुछ और हो रहा है, right? What should I be doing at this point in time?
Yeah.
Gold double हो गया, मैं भी क्या करूँ? Silver triple हो गया, should I be doing something about it?
Crash भी हो गया बहुत.
Right? I'm just saying कि all these questions keep coming up, right?
Yeah.
Now imagine if there is a fund which is in some sense taking away a lot of these worries away from you, right? And doing the entire rebalancing in a disciplined way, based on a certain process, and there is a certain methodology here. And in a lot of the models that we've developed now, we use a lot of machine learning. Now, considering the fact that the AI is available, and considering we are a technology company, right? We are one of the early adopters of AI.
Yeah.
So we also deploy a lot of AI, when we are trying to do research around alpha, signal generation, all of that. So that is also happening on a continuous basis within the fund.
For an ordinary investor, this is too complicated. I mean, too sophisticated to understand.
Right.
In the present scenario, to begin with, how
Yes.
are you going to start with? Because you said equity for AlphaGrep
Yes.
multi-asset fund will be 10 to 60, fixed will be 10
Yes.
to 60,
Yes.
and gold is 10 to 40%.
Yes, commodities 10 to 40.
Commodities, sorry, not
Yes,
gold.
yes,
Commodities
yes.
10 to 40%.
Yes.
So in the present scenario, to begin with, how will AlphaGrep deploy?
Sure. So see, in terms of complication, this might sound complicated, but the point here is that the outcome is simple, right?
Yeah.
The outcome is simple that in the long run, you're trying to get a certain, let's say, returns, which we believe are, let's say, closer to equities in the long term, with much lower risk, right? So that's the journey we are trying to give. Right at the back
Nifty,
end,
right? Nifty gave 11% and your model gave 14%.
Yes. Now, to your point, in terms of कि भाई, how should one be thinking about
if
this?
I have 10,000 rupees now, how should I allocate it across the three assets that you talked about?
Yes. So broadly, when I was looking at the last, let's say the rebalancing number that we saw, broadly the model at this point of time, let's say as of last week or last to last week when I looked at the numbers, the model was showing up around a 33-34% to equities allocation.
Okay.
Around 20-21% to commodities, and the balance was going into fixed income.
Fixed income. Okay.
Right.
So still, this is a risk.
So still kind of midway there. It's kind of midway there.
Okay.
And another thing I want to mention.
This model tells us कि equities में पैसा डालना अभी थोड़ा risky है.
That is what,
only
see,
30%.
So possibly, yes, that is what the data is telling us.
Exactly.
Saying that this is where the average should be at this point of time. Having said that, I'm just telling you one more thing, that historically, okay, I'm just telling you an example of how dynamic the model can be.
Okay.
In the last 20-year period, there was a 1-year instance. I'm talking about the maximum movement that happened within a year. Within 12 months, the model at one point of time had a 11% exposure to equities. Okay. And within 12 months, it moved to 55%. Okay, so that's how dynamic the model can be. Okay, I'll give you another example of a month. And if I'm not getting it wrong, that's probably the maximum movement we've had in a single month. From 1 month to a next month, the model actually increased equity exposure by 20%. Okay, so again, I'm just saying because this is more statistical data and not just valuation based, the model is able to kind of adapt, move around things much faster. Again, it all depends on what the data is telling the model.
Exactly. Bhautik, you talked about your own model which generated 14% CAGR for 20 years, but this is on back-tested data.
Yes.
There's no real-life investment involved. So how different does it become when जब पैसा actual market में जाता है, market में volatility आती है, US, Iran, Israel आ जाता है. I mean, all kinds of
agree
crisis.
See, you are right. See, that can come in, emotions, biases can creep in if you don't let the model do what it is supposed to do. And if you start intervening. Let's say अगर जो मैं इसके अंदर human oversight को छोड़ के, if I start bringing in human decision making. Okay. See, ultimately the model has been created by humans. The model is built in such a way that we believe that आगे जाके crisis आएगा. Okay. And that's exactly the reason why the starting point of the model is risk.
Exactly.
And not maximization of returns. Okay. So the model is built only in such a way that it is believing that in future there will be crisis, in future there will be tougher market situations. And how can you build a model or how can you build a portfolio which is resilient across market conditions? Okay. And the other thing, to answer your question on backtest, see, when we launched our, let's say, long only PMS, right? We had similar simulated data that we showed on our PMS. We've had a pretty decent performance over the last 4 years on a long only PMS, okay, which is pretty much in line with what we realized earlier. We've been running a long short strategy for 4 years now. Again, out there, we've seen pretty competitive returns within that space. And the third thing is that, considering the fact that AlphaGrep ka DNA is to build and run quantitative strategies, one thing somebody can very clearly see is that we've been successful at doing this on our own capital over 16 years, which means that there are certain things we know when we are building some of these models, what to avoid, right? How to not just curve fit or retrofit models, right? To show, certain things as backtested data. Okay.
For the last 20 years, investors are sold on SIPs. SIP karo, traditional SIPs, every month invest fixed amount. Over a long period you generate returns. Is that SIP strategy still the best one? What would be your advice to SIP investors? How should they go about investing in the market when there are so many products available, itna competition, and everybody is trying to occupy their mind space ki hamara le lo, hamara SIP le lo, hum best hai. What would be your advice to those investors?
See, the way I look at it is that SIP is an amazing savings instrument, right? Because what that does is that it brings in discipline to savings. कि मेरे पास, कुछ इनकम आ रहा है एवरी मंथ and उसमें से कुछ portion I'm able to save on a month-on-month basis, right? And because I've signed up for it, it's like a forced saving that is happening out here, right? Which otherwise, let's say, could have gone into maybe some expense or somewhere else, right? So in some sense, I think it's a very good instrument for people to save in the long term. Okay. Now, people should not confuse savings with, just investments. When I say that, I am saying that the decision making कि भाई SIP करना चाहिए, that is more as a savings tool. But वो SIP कहाँ करना चाहिए, that is also very important.
Yeah.
Okay, because that I think has to be guided basis कि भाई मेरा risk profile क्या है, मेरे portfolio में मेरी risk taking capability क्या है, right? मेरा जो overall let's say allocation है, उसके अंदर where does SIP fit in? I don't think it's only about deciding कि भाई मैंने SIP कर लिया तो सिर्फ वो equity में हो सकता है.
Okay.
Right? So I think a lot of times what happens is that people consider these two things as synonyms.
Okay.
कि भाई SIP किया तो equity में होना चाहिए. I don't think that is the case. In my view, SIP is more of a savings instrument. Right? आप वो savings आप debt में करो, आप hybrid funds में करो, आप equity में करो. It is saving for you. Because that decision making has to be based on what is the asset allocation which fits your risk profile.
Okay.
Right? And how much you want to save, how much you want to accumulate over a period of time.
Okay, for an investor who has a moderate risk profile, and given you advice just now, would you advise them to go in to do SIPs in a diversified equity portfolio or SIP in a multi-asset allocation fund? How would these two differ?
So I would put it this way. Let's say I'm just taking our own example. Okay, let's say a large cap fund. Okay, in the long run can give me, for example, Nifty plus 100 basis points, 200 basis points. Alpha, assuming कि possible है, right? Which again is a challenge or a question mark today for a lot of large cap funds. But let's assume कि वो कर सकते हैं. So which means that let's say a large cap fund can in the long term give me 12-13% return. Now that 12-13% return is going to come with equity market risk, which means equity market volatility, equity market drawdowns, all of that. Okay. Now versus that, if I can potentially get similar returns, okay, and that one fund itself can give me diversification across multiple asset classes, because it's giving you diversification, managing that risk also dynamically, it is bringing down your risk drastically. Okay, then why would I not choose a smoother place or a smoother ride of doing the same SIP?
Equity curve smooth हो जाता है.
Equity curve आपका smooth हो जाएगा. Okay, it's like saying that कि भाई मुझे बॉम्बे पूना जाना है, मैं ओल्ड बॉम्बे पूना हाईवे लूँ या एक्सप्रेस वे लूँ. There's a higher likelihood that कि भाई I will want to do this journey again and again, or maybe even take a longer journey if I can do it on an expressway because it's a smoother journey.
Yeah.
Versus let's say taking a older highway where I can have potholes, speed breakers, lot of bumps.
Comparatively lesser risks.
And see the fact here is that today हम लोग कितना भी बोल ले कि भाई people are investing for the long term, people have changed, become matured, which is there. Yeah. But having said that, the fact is also that in the last close to 10 years, we haven't seen any meaningful corrections in the market other than COVID, which was a blip.
Yeah, exactly. 3 months.
Right?
It was gone.
So in my view, I think for any investor, if you think about it behaviorally, right? Like where is the potential that I will stick around for a longer period of time? And what is that journey that I want to do? Rather than just targeting maximum returns, right? Is the way to look at things.
Okay. So in your assessment, what should be the investment horizon for an ordinary retail SIP investor, mutual fund investor? What should be the time horizon for which the money should remain invested? 5 years, 10 years, 15 years?
See, I would say minimum 3 years when somebody is looking at investing in our fund. Having said that, if this kind of suits your risk return profile from a portfolio perspective, let's say, आपको 3 साल के बाद, for example, let's say 12% का compound return मिल रहा है. And if that is something which you are targeting as part of your core allocation, and if it is meeting that, then you should just stick around, right?
Okay.
Then it doesn't matter, whether 3 साल हो गया और मुझे कुछ करना चाहिए action, because see, the fund is anyways taking those actions regularly. Those actions are something that the fund is anyways dynamically taking for you, right? कि भाई equity market यहाँ से चल गया, मुझे थोड़ा allocation कम करना है, commodities में enter करना है, नहीं करना है. All those things the fund is anyways doing on a dynamic basis.
So, given our earlier conversation where you said investors should now focus on a diversified portfolio, diversified asset portfolio rather than
Multi-asset,
only
yes.
portfolio. So, has the time now come for investors to ditch equity only portfolio and look at a diversified asset allocation?
Let me answer this question slightly differently. Let's say मेरे पास 2 फंड का ऑप्शन है. ओके, एक फंड में मुझे 13% का रिटर्न मिल रहा है, बट खराब मार्केट आने पे आई कैन लूज 30% देयर. ओके, दूसरा फंड है जहाँ पे अगेन मुझे 13% का रिटर्न आ रहा है और खराब मार्केट में शायद 12-13% का ड्रॉडाउन दिख रहा है. कौन सा फंड चूज करना चाहिए मुझे? I'll obviously choose the second one.
Yeah.
Right? So if I have this choice available today, where I can still get similar returns, but with a lower risk, then why would I not choose this? Right? And my other point here is very simple. कि let's say as part of my core allocation, अगर जो मेरा 12-13% से target meet हो रहा है as my core portfolio allocation, okay, then I can put that as a core allocation, and then as let's say a satellite, I can actually take higher risk strategies which can potentially generate higher returns also. So for example, I can build a satellite portfolio with, let's say, mid cap funds, small cap funds, right? Maybe even sector funds, depends on what an investor wants to do. But at least my core is kind of taken care of, right?
So talking about multi-cap funds, how do you look at small caps, mid caps and large caps? What do you think are can give better return to investors, and what would be your weight on small caps, mid caps and large caps in the equity part of your asset allocation?
So in our fund, we've consciously, because again, like I've been saying from the beginning, our focus is more on risk-adjusted returns and not maximizing returns. On the equity portion, as of today, consciously we've taken a call. We will only stick to large plus mid. Okay. So broadly, the top 200.
What data makes you this cautious?
It's simple, na?
Why not mid caps, small caps, which are darlings of the market right now? Everybody wants to have huge alphas by investing in small caps.
Yes. I think you might remember this data again. So if you remember in 2008 when Nifty crashed by around 60%, if I'm not wrong, the small cap index crashed by around 80%. Okay. Now, I don't know, again, before this had happened, I don't think we had seen a correction like that in the past, before 2008. Right? So there can always be a first time.
In India, yeah.
Yes, there can always be a first time for anything. Okay. So the way I look at it is that, yes, by adding small caps, potentially we can add more alpha or returns to the portfolio. But we also believe that that will also add to the risk. Okay. And that is not something that we want to do in this strategy. Tomorrow, let's say, when we launch a flexi cap fund, because that's already approved for us, we've already announced, that we're going to launch it soon. Now, when we launch that, we will have an exposure to large, mid, small. But that's the mandate of that fund.
Yeah.
Okay. But the mandate for this strategy is that कि भाई अगर जो मुझे large plus mid में रह के by doing this dynamic asset allocation, if I'm able to achieve that, that let's say 12-13% kind of a band return in the long term with let's say 1/3 or 1/4 the equity risk, then I would choose to do that rather than saying that कि मुझे 12 की जगह 15% target करना है by adding small caps. Because in that case, my drawdown instead of 12% or 13% can maybe look like 20%.
Okay. So to those investors who are right now chasing mid caps and small caps, looking at technical breakouts on the charts, would you ask them to exercise caution?
I would say at any point in time, right? Whether it's today, whether it's sometime in the future or in the past, the way I look at it is that one should allocate only that much percentage of the portfolio in small mid caps, which fits into the risk profile of their overall portfolio.
Okay. But the investor sentiment is, the behavior is nobody bothers about risk. It's only the returns that the focus, as you said, numerator पे ज़्यादा ध्यान देते हैं, denominator पे कोई ध्यान नहीं देता.
See, that is the unfortunate part.
So I was asking, what data suggests that market is not conducive for investment in small caps and mid caps?
See, to be honest, predicting macros in the short to medium term, in my view or in our view, is a futile exercise. Okay, because there are so many variables which are at play at any point of time. Okay, it is next to impossible for one person to kind of analyze all variables and say that कि ये सारे variables का, this is going to be the outcome.
Sum is this, yeah.
Right, in the short to medium term. तो अगर जो मैं वो कर ही नहीं सकता हूँ, तो how do I kind of predict कि भाई अगले 6-12 महीने में what is going to make sense or not going to make sense?
Okay.
Right? Like think about it today itself, right? There are so many variables. Interest rates have moved up globally. You're facing a geopolitical situation. Oil prices have shot up again, right? We are a net importer. Yeah. Yes, on the other side, domestic macros are looking more stable. We also have a monsoon which has been erratic so far. So
that's a huge worry, actually.
Right? I'm just saying that there are always multiple variables at play, whether it's a combination of global plus local. So if that is the case, then we don't want to be, in the business of kind of predicting markets in the short to medium term. Okay. We would rather say that, कि भाई, as an investor, if you stick to some kind of an asset allocation which fits your risk profile, you should be doing that rather than, playing by कि भाई yesterday's winner कौन था, उसमें मैं आगे पैसा लगाते रहूं.
Okay.
Which is where recency bias comes in.
Okay. Talking about commodities, you're looking at gold, silver, copper, and crude. So how do you look at the commodity cycle going ahead for metals, for precious metals, gold, silver? How do you think they are going? Because they're gone.
They've run up a lot in the last couple of years. They've corrected a lot.
So
yes.
What would be how do you look at
the way we look at
metals?
So again, the way we look at things.
Ordinary investors don't go for copper.
Yes, I know.
It's only gold and silver that they.
I know. That also I believe like most of them have started taking exposure only in the last year or so.
Yeah,
again, after
most of it is also through ETFs.
Yes. So the way I would see things is that we are not here to predict and say कि भाई ये चारों commodities are only going to go up from here.
Okay.
We are saying we have models, like we have models for deciding on when to invest in which asset class. Okay. Similarly, we have models in terms of कि भाई कौन से commodity में कब पैसा लगाना है, नहीं लगाना है, निकाल लेना है, exposure कम करना है. Okay. And we would let the models decide. Okay. So we're not here to predict saying that कि भाई gold का भाव यहाँ से X है तो Y जाएगा in the next 6 months, 12 months. We're not trying to do that. Okay. And that's the reason we have a daily rebalancing. Okay. So based on the data, we can probably, I'm just saying, our model can suggest last week to have an exposure to an X commodity, and next week it can also tell us that have zero exposure to that commodity. It can change that quickly. Okay. So I'm just saying that, that is where...
Talking again about data, what is data suggesting? I mean, should they go for precious metals or...
See, as of today, our model is exposed to, again, if I'm getting my data right, for which was probably dated a couple of weeks back.
Okay.
It had an exposure of around 10% to gold, and the balance 10%, because our overall exposure was around, let's say, 20-21%. Okay. The balance 10-11% was broadly equally divided across the balance three commodities. Yes, which again, if I'm getting the trend right, 3 months back was a higher number to some of these commodities, which it has kind of cut in the last few months. Another thing that we also don't realize is that a lot of these commodities, because they are global commodities and they are priced in dollar, right? If the INR were to depreciate, like it has depreciated in the past, you also get a hedge against currency. Because both equities and fixed income don't give you that hedge. It is only commodities which is giving you a hedge against currency.
That's another dynamic that needs to be added.
Yes, which we all don't realize.
Normally, investors chase higher returns. What's wrong with that goal? How should investors balance their expectations of returns?
See, again, it's like, rear view में देख के गाड़ी चलाएंगे तो आगे नहीं तो चल के कभी ना कभी तो एक्सीडेंट होगा. Okay. So in my view, by just looking at the recent returns, right, can lead to some of those challenges in the future. Okay. Which I think somebody who has seen longer cycles or multiple cycles kind of realizes that. Okay. But the unfortunate part is if many of us have not seen that, then, then we kind of assume that the markets will only function in a certain way. Like, I don't know how many investors who came in, post-COVID, let's say in 21, 22, had an experience where कि भाई 2 साल तक market ने कुछ return नहीं दिया. right? How many of them are today questioning, saying that, am I in the right asset class? Kuch ho nahi raha hai, kyun nahi ho raha hai, right? So all those questions then creep up. Okay. So my view would always be that, let the asset allocation do the job for you, rather than you always trying to invest in yesterday's winners. Okay. And I say yesterday's winner always.
Yeah. A related question, but a specific one. Suppose you were advising a 30-year-old who has 25,000, which she or he can invest for the next 25 years for generating a retirement corpus. And that person is willing to invest 25,000 every month for next 25 years. How would you split that money today across equity, debt, gold, commodities, and international exposure?
See, the way I would think about it is that I don't think asset allocation is as simple as एक जो thumb rule generally follow होता है 100 minus age. Exactly. That people try to follow. I don't think it's as simple as that. In my view, there are multiple other variables which go into deciding somebody's asset allocation. Okay, but having said that, I think if somebody has such a long horizon, the fact is that equity, potentially can generate the highest wealth over a period of time.
Okay.
Having said that, yes, it can generate the highest wealth, but you should have some stabilizer, which is nothing but, let's say, fixed income. You should have some exposure to, let's say, commodities, which can give you, again, some kind of stability in risk. Or, when there is a big risk scenario in the markets, give you some protection in those kind of periods. Also protection against, let's say, if there is currency depreciation. So I think a healthy mix across the three would still make sense, so even for a young investor.
Okay. Would you say that if the person were to do this for next 25 years, he were to invest, instead of a diversified equity portfolio, if he were to invest in multi-asset allocation portfolio, she or he would generate better returns with lower risks?
I would say versus a large cap fund, at least our historical data shows that this would have generated better returns.
Okay.
The second point to note is that, in my view, by doing this, there's a high possibility that that person will not only continue, but probably step up the SIP.
Okay.
Right, over a period of time, over that 20-25 year journey. Because the fact is that today, when you look at the industry data, the average holding period is still less than 2 years in mutual funds. Okay. तो हम लोग बात long term की करते हैं,
लेकिन
data कुछ और बोल रहा है. ठीक है. So again, when we kind of try to curate this fund, our whole objective was that how do we get investors to stick around for the long term? Because it's more of a behavioral thing rather than just trying to maximize returns.
Okay. What's the biggest mistake that retail investors often make, even while investing via mutual funds?
I think, like I had mentioned, right? In my view, it's two things. One is trying to focus a lot on कि भाई मुझे right fund pick करना है, number one fund pick करना है, right? Just take a step back. First think about कि भाई मुझे कौन सा पैसा कहाँ लगाना चाहिए, right? Asset allocation पहले वो decide करो. So there is enough and more research to prove that will make you stick around for the long term, right? And help you create that wealth in the long term. And the second one is try and avoid recency bias.
Okay. Recency bias को थोड़ा simply explain करेंगे हमारे दर्शकों के लिए?
वही है कि भाई if you keep looking at कि भाई last 1 year, 2 year, 3 year performance कौन सा best fund है, बस उसी में हम पैसा लगाते रहेंगे, तो possibility है कि you may not have a experience going forward, because वही वो rear view mirror वाला काम है.
Okay. So what should be the ideal way of looking at this aspect of investing?
I think the ideal way should be that, as long as you diversify across multiple asset classes, then within that, you can pick and choose funds which are diversified, which can give you exposure across, let's say, multiple styles or multiple asset classes, that itself, and then you just stick around with that.
Okay.
Right? Rather than, because काफी बार क्या होता है ना, लोगों का, again, that behavioral thing comes in, कि कुछ नहीं चल रहा है, again I jump in, and I try to make changes, which more often than not is like something which actually creates a detractor to the portfolio rather than adding anything to the portfolio.
Okay. Yeah. Final question, Bhautik, before we end this podcast. If you were to build a portfolio for the next 20 years, what would it be? How would you go about doing it?
So I would at least today, the way I'm kind of revamping the portfolio now, considering, I have this option available where I can, dynamically allocate, which our fund is going to do. I am broadly looking at, a 1/3, 1/3, 1/3 mix at this point in time, where I'm looking at investing a third in our own multi-asset strategy, a third in equities domestically, and a third internationally.
Okay. Bhautik, thank you so much for joining us on the Rediff Podcast and explaining to our viewers in simple terms what investing is all about, how should they go about managing risk, which is the most important part for any investors to look at.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Prasanna. It's my pleasure to be here.
Thank you.
Thank you.